I think for me, I had still a big point of risk aversion, right? I think like anybody who goes into banking on some level, you have some like a decent like high risk averse like personality on some level. And so for me, that first jump was actually very scary. I said, in the company that I look at, like you couldn't have a lot of money in the bank, like that is actually a plus for me. But I need to know you're going to be around in about a year or two, because I can't be making like, these jumps all the time. And like, if the company goes down, I think that was a big fear for me. And so when I was filtering for companies, I was like, okay, what is related? And I really wanted something with like somewhat of a physical product at the time, given like my exposure to industrials. And so Uber really felt like a perfect fit there, because one of my really close friends from Moelis actually was the one who referred me. He was like, I'm on the New Jersey team. We do all sorts of analysis to try and make this market run better. We do all sorts of different things that your skills actually transfer. And obviously, while it's still like a little bit scared, because you're like, you don't know if you're going to be good at this job or not. Like, you've only ever done finance. You're like, okay, like if I make this jump, like what is going to happen? And I think I really made the jump, like, and I was less scared to, because I had, the deferred admission for Stanford in my back pocket. And so that made me way less scared. I was like, you know what, even if this is the worst 3 years of my life, like, or 2 years of my life, it'll be totally fine. I can like have a reset when I go to business school. But yeah, I think in terms of people who are looking from banking, I get that it's really hard, because like everybody, if I think about in my industrials group, everyone except one other person who actually also started a company, like everybody else is still in finance, and everybody else is still like, they're all VPs actually now in like, at like Insight, or like they're going to like Capital Group, like amazing roles, like dream jobs for a lot of people. But I think it's really hard coming from a group like industrials, like not doing finance, right? And so like when you're looking around at what there is out there, people will try to shove you into FP&A roles, and if you are like sure that you're interested in something else, like hold firm on that, and you will be able to find something. And like it might not be the perfect company. But for me, I was like, I need someone to take a chance on me for operations specifically. And that's why like I ended up at Uber, because a lot of other people were like, you don't have ops experience, like this isn't right. And so they were willing
that's a great point. That's maybe a follow-up question, like finding the right types of roles at these companies. So like maybe talk a little bit about, I think you're right. Operations is great. I think business development, these are types of roles that people, so what are the types of roles do you think that are exciting enough that people should consider? And what are the types, you alluded to this on the FP&A side, what are the types of ones that you should sort of be a little skeptical about?
Yes, I would say actually, in terms of business development, it can mean 50 billion things. Like, be very careful when you're taking a business development role, because it could mean like cold calling random people, and like that might not be what you like at all. It can also mean M&A, right? And so you got to really figure out like, what do these roles mean, right? Because it's not as standard as finance, where you're like, okay, yeah, this is what this means. Associate, manager, like those leveling like things, like don't really like, every company uses it differently, right? Like there are post MBAs going into associate roles like at a company, versus while that's normal for like, B school and like Goldman, like that is not as normal in terms of looking at industry jobs. And so when thinking about what types of roles would be interesting, I will tell you, like, you could love FP&A. Some people love FP&A. I knew I didn't want to do FP&A, but because you have the finance experience, like they will try to put you there. Some people really want to do strategy. Strategy is actually a really cool group a lot of times. Like you really get a high level overview. If you're a person who doesn't want to be in the weeds, like that is a place you might want to go. But the warning there is that you're competing against like the McKinsey kids. And a lot of times they will want the McKinsey kids over you, because they're better at some of the market sizing, maybe some of the channel analysis, etc. So if that's something you want, you kind of have to know you're going to have to fight for it on some level. Chief of staff roles are pretty trendy. Once again, like be very careful. Chief of staff can mean you're booking flights, or it can mean you're sitting in board meeting. Like figure out which one it is, and like understand like where you fall. And so, I would say like there are probably interesting things about every role. Like I think your advantage as a banking analyst is really your analytical skill, your modeling skills, and your understanding of accounting and finance. And obviously play to those strengths. And you should. But like if you do really want something else, like figure out how to pitch yourself for it, because it might not be that easy.
That's great advice. And I think implicit in that, and Jane did a good job of characterizing the risk component of here. Like, one part of the risk is if that is something you really want to do, don't keep pushing it off. Oh, I'll do this after, whatever. If that's something you're really interested in, think about it. And number two, finding that right company, which Jane did, kind of what is that bridges your risk a reward dynamic, right? So joining something early enough, but also being established enough such that you don't feel like you've just gone to a great school or, you know, whatever, you've gone to this great bank, and then now you're sort of in this pool where you don't know where it's going to end up. So, and then the last thing I'll say on that point, which we'll get to in a second, is business school actually, it tends to normalize people, but it also tends to, you know, if you have a story of why you did something, I think that could actually be helpful. So we'll get to that in a second, Jane. But before we